There's a place He comes to me. Though I'm blind, He helps me see. Though I see dimly in this place, one day I'll see Him face to face.
This is Kurt Kaikkonen, pastor of Calvary Chapel, Waterford, at your neighborhood church. Today on Face to Face, we'll be in the book of Exodus. So grab your Bibles and let's get started. If you want to hear this complete message in its entirety, go to yourneighborhoodchurch.com, where you can download Your Neighborhood Church app at the App Store. And so now they're there and they're imagining that they and their children, that they're going to die. And so now they're in this fight or flight mode, but there's nowhere to flee to. And there's another lesson here for us to learn. If you ever know, or anybody ever told you, the Pharaoh, he always represents the devil in the Bible. And so right here, you see God has delivered these people, like just God has delivered us from the bondage of the devil. And he had this really great victory. Well, what you learn is that the devil's always going to come back again, and he's going to attack you. He's going to try to put you back in bondage. But these people, even after seeing God work, fear has a hold of them. And it's really easy here to understand that. And when there's fear in a crowd, it spreads. It's very, very contagious. But so is faith. And so what Moses does here is he says the very obvious. He says, don't be afraid. But I'm not really sure that he wasn't a little afraid. And then he tells him to quit moving around, and he tells him to stand still. And standing still is about the hardest thing to do when you have great fear, because you want to flee, or else you become paralyzed by your fear and you can't move. And then Moses, he says, see the salvation of the Lord. And when Moses is talking about salvation, he's talking about a physical salvation. He's not talking about salvation in a spiritual sense, like the way we use the word salvation. And then he says, and what he will accomplish for you today, and you will never see them again forever. The Lord will fight for you. And then Moses tells them to hold their peace. Now, I heard that a lot growing up. And really, to hold your peace is just basically the polite ways to tell somebody to shut up and to quit complaining. And the reason that I think Moses might be a little afraid is because of what God says next to him. And he says, well, why do you cry to me? So we see here that Moses is still crying, but he's acting really strong in front of these people. And then God tells Moses to tell the people to go forward. But when fear grips us and we're feeling trapped, it's really hard to move forward. And it's that paralysis that we're talking about. But we can't allow fear to stop us from moving forward. And the way you can deal with that is by not taking your eyes off the Lord. And then you make yourself go forward, even if it doesn't feel right. And it doesn't say it here, but I would get the feeling that that pillar was already over the Red Sea at that time. And Moses, he's not really sure what the Lord's going to do next, but he knows that the Lord is going to do something. Because you have to remember, Moses, he's never seen the movie and he's never read this chapter. And so God's basically telling Moses to quit crying and tell the children to go forward. And that all Moses has to do is to lift up his rod to part the Red Sea. And so what I believe God is saying here to Moses, he says, hey, I've heard your prayers. It's not time to pray anymore. Now it's time to move. Because there is a time to pray, but then there's a time to put your faith into action and to move forward and to act on what you've been praying about, especially when the Lord is leading. And here, God is literally leading with a pillar of fire. And it wasn't Moses who parted the Red Sea. It was God. All Moses had to do is just lift up his stick in faith. God does all the hard work. And that's how God does the miracles in our lives too. All we do is we just ask, and then we act in just simple obedience, and then we watch God do the miracles. And then we hear that the east wind blows, and he folds the water back, and no one's ever seen anything like this before. And the only thing the children of Israel can do is go forward. The Lord here, he didn't really leave them any more options, because if he had left them any other option, they would have taken them. And they've never seen anything like this. And now the ground, it looks dry, but it would have still take tremendous faith. But I still think I wouldn't have wanted to be the one to go first. And then God tells Moses he's going to harden Pharaoh's heart so that Pharaoh will follow them into the sea. And then you just really kind of have to stop and think, what was Pharaoh thinking? And the reason God is doing this is the same reason for that reason of the 10 plagues, which is so the Egyptians will know that I am the Lord, which is that same exact question that the Pharaoh had said to Moses when Moses met him for the very first time, where Pharaoh said, "Who is the Lord that I should obey his voice to let Israel go?" So now all of Egypt is going to know who is the Lord. And then that pillar moves from in front of them to behind them, and he becomes a wall of protection to Israel. Where on the children of Israel's side, there's this fiery pillar that gives them light to travel on this dry ground. But on the Egyptian side, this same pillar is a pillar of darkness. It's a pillar of cloud. And we read in Psalm 77:16 that we're also told there that there's also this great storm that accompanied the parting of the sea. So there's also water being poured out on the Egyptians as they're walking through. So their side was all slick and muddy, and that storm went on all night long. And then the Apostle Paul, he also writes about the same event in his letter of the 1 Corinthians in chapter 10, verse 2, where he says that their fathers, and so what Paul is talking about, he's talking about these Jewish people that we're reading about here, that they all passed through the Red Sea. And he's saying, all were baptized in Moses in that cloud in the sea. And so for Israel, this is like the baptism in the life of a believer. Where way back at the Passover, Israel was redeemed from their slavery. And they were redeemed by the blood of a lamb. So, and that was that blood that was put on their doors. That is where Israel began its spiritual life, where they became the people of God as a nation. And so now this is Israel's first act of faith in their public proclamation of being God's people by this passing through the Red Sea. But they do it together, and they do it all as one nation. And this is the same for us as Christians, where we too are redeemed by God by the blood of a lamb, but then we're also commanded to, as one of our first acts of faith, to be baptized in water for what the Lord has already done for us by the delivering us by the shedding of his blood, by the lamb's blood. So here's Israel's baptism by going through the sea, where now they are being identified with Moses. So their relationship with God is being identified through the law. But we as Christians, as God's people of today, we're identified with Jesus Christ. And that's who we're identified with our baptism. All right, so now morning is approaching. And Israel, they've walked all night long with these walls of water on the right and their walls of water on the left. And I believe even with all this adversity, the Egyptians are starting to close in on them. Because it says there that the Lord looked down through the pillar of fire and cloud, and he started taking off their chariot wheels. And I don't know why, but it's up to this point where the Egyptians have now decided to flee. And it's really incredible to me that it took them this long to figure out that the Lord was against them. And then the Lord told Moses to stretch out his hand over the sea, and then the water was brought back down on the Egyptians. And here again, that power that came down to move the sea, it didn't come out of Moses' hands, but the Lord is wanting to do this act through Moses. And the reason he's doing it is because he wants the people to honor Moses as his representative, because the people are learning who God is through Moses. And again, that's the same for us. God wants to use us for other people's lives. And it's never because he needs to or that he has to, but it's that we're going to represent him to other people, and it's for their sake, but it's also for ours. All right. So when we last left Moses and the children of Israel on the shore of the Red Sea, after that long night of walking on dry land in the midst of that sea, they're all safe from their enemies, and now they're only seeing the Egyptians' dead bodies scattered along the shoreline. And by God giving them such a great deliverance, it called for a song, because they had something to sing about now. And this is the first mention of any song in the Bible. And we've never heard of the children of Israel ever singing any song to the Lord back in Egypt or during their captivity as slaves. We've never even heard of the children of Israel ever worshiping the Lord in any way. And when they left Egypt, we don't hear them singing to the Lord, but we heard them complaining and asking Moses to take them back to Egypt. And that's all because Israel was immature in their faith. Israel had never chosen God. God chose them. And he's showing them who he is by his actions, by revealing himself to them. So in this new faith of theirs, this is not a blind faith. They didn't just make him up like how all the other false gods were just made up by men's imaginations. And God, he revealed to them, which is the same for us today as believers. And with most of us, we weren't really looking for God either, but God found us and he revealed himself to us. And it was maybe like through his word, or maybe it was through our circumstances, where we too, like Israel, where we just didn't accept God, but we responded to God in his revealing of himself to us. And that's what happens to us when God has chosen to reveal himself to us. That's when we choose him. But you have to realize, in much of the same way, God had revealed himself to the Pharaoh and to Egypt. The only difference was they just weren't willing to choose him as God. And so now here in this song, Israel is responding to God as the whole nation who chooses him, because now he's revealed himself to them. And this song starts with, I will sing to the Lord. So here, the audience is just one. The audience is the Lord. And that's the same as when we sing here in the church. We're not just singing to each other like we're singing around the campfire, but here we're singing to an audience of one. We're singing to God himself, and we're singing for his pleasure. And it's kind of like when we sing happy birthday to somebody, where we'll try to do our best, but it doesn't have to be professional, but it does need to be sincere, and it needs to be out of love. You've been listening to Face to Face. Face to Face on this radio station has been provided by Your Neighborhood Church. If you want to help support Face to Face and put this program on other stations just like yours, you can contact us at yourneighborhoodchurch.com or write Your Neighborhood Church, P.O. Box 500, Romeo, Michigan 48065.
There's a place he comes to me, though I'm blind. He helps me see, though I see dimly. In this place, one day I'll see him face to face.
Tune in again tomorrow at this same time as we continue to go through the Bible.